Great.
What identity about yourself would you not be willing to give up, and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I've thought about this a lot, mainly from a spiritual sense, in that, and I think this is useful for you, because we've just been talking about this.
Yeah.
Every time you let go of an identity, you have a death.
Right. Deaths are hard.
Deaths are hard. They're fucking hard.
Yeah.
They're scary. Because an identity is like, it's a self-belief of who you are. And so to let go of oneself is to die.
Yeah. That's why it's so hard.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. Yeah. And the funny thing about identity is, and this is how our subconscious fucks us. Our subconscious fucks us when I believe, right? I don't know. I have to struggle. If I believe I have to struggle, right? Or if I believe I only get success through struggle, right? If I have that belief about myself, I'll either find things that are hard, or if I stumble across something that's easy, it won't feel congruent.
It won't feel as satisfying.
It won't feel satisfying, but I'll feel like something's wrong, because I'll be like, hold on, I can't have success unless things have been hard.
Yeah.
So this can't be success. Something's wrong with this.
Yikes.
And if that's what your subconscious is telling you when you wake up every day, then you're probably going to find ways to make it hard. Because then you're like, it's hard, and then you're like, it's hard.
This feels right.
This feels right.
This is what I thought it would be.
This is what I thought it would be. Yeah. And the tension is resolved. Because you have tension and then you have resolve.
Yeah.
And so when
visualization and manifestation.
Of course. Your subconscious has got to be right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have to question the fabric of your own reality. If your identity is not true, you lose your sense of self, you die. If what you believe about the world is not true, that's called, is it schizophrenia, or is it, what's the other one? I think schizophrenia is hearing voices. Psychosis. It's psychosis.
Oh,
Psychosis is, I think, I could have the definition wrong, but like when you believe things that are not actually reality. So identity is a really big thing, right? And your identity might be, I have to struggle. Your identity might be, I had a hard upbringing and so I'm broken, right? That's going to play out in all kinds of like low self-esteem stuff. Your identity,
in all the areas of your life.
Correct. It might be like a hypo-positive. It might be like, I deserve. Your identity might be, I deserve, right? And so that's where you have like the pretty girl syndrome, right? Where a pretty girl has just been given everything in life because either she bats her eyelids or not, but people, react to someone with natural beauty a certain way, and she becomes the popular girl in school, and she, becomes favored by boys and gets lots of attention, and everything in life has been really easy for her.
If she doesn't get
really easy for her. And yeah, and if she doesn't get that, like all of a sudden the reality is broken. She's like, oh, but I deserve to get everything.
Yeah.
And what does that end up in?
What's happening?
Exactly. And so narcissistic tendencies can build for someone, and yeah, sure, there's pretty boys as well, but specifically talking about females here. But someone who's in that situation, can get a rude shock when they're 30, 40 years old. All of a sudden their body starts changing, or their place in the dating market starts changing. They're like, what the fuck? I can't just bat my eyelids and get what I want anymore, right?
So, in line with that,
yes.
What identity are you willing to give up, and why that?
Well, it's interesting. I've thought a lot about it because I've let go of a number of big identities in my life. I had to let go of my parents divorced when I was young, therefore I had a broken family. That was a big one to let go of. I don't know exactly when I let go of that, but I do remember I did let go of, it was a different identity. The identity was, I need to work hard to survive, or I need to look after myself. That was a really big identity. And I realized it was only after I started doing therapy when I was like, I don't know, mid-20s, and I realized, oh my God, how much of my business drive, and I used to say this to my friends over and over again, I want to build a business so I don't have to worry about my kids having food on the table.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's your motivation?
That was my motivation for like a good solid decade.
Ooh,
solid decade.
Wow.
Because you can tell from my childhood experience, it was pretty unstable household. Parents are divorcing. They're angry at each other. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old me is like, well, these guys don't know how to be fucking adults. I'm going to have to be an adult myself.
Yeah.
I'll work out how to start making money. I already naturally enjoyed making money, but that kind of like supercharged it. Like, oh, okay, now I need to make money for myself. Great, I'll go do that. And it was interesting how long that lasted for, because the intensity with which I worked was a survival intensity.
Yeah.
It was, and that's why I was able to pull 80, 100-hour weeks. It was like, this is easy.
Insane.
I got to survive.
Yeah.
I got to survive. So
Gotta put food on the table.
got to put food on the table. Exactly. And there was this like immature, not really egoistic, but certainly like a thought coming from an immature place, which was, I don't want my kids to go through what I went through. And we weren't in extreme poverty by any means, but we were lower end of middle class, I guess. And yeah, it was, I think what I actually wanted, reflecting on it now, I think what I actually perceived that I would get with money was stability.
Right.
Choice and stability. Yeah, so that drove me for a long time. But then I had to give up that identity, because I realized, like all shadows, after shining the light on the shadow, I realized that, oh, actually, I don't think I want this shadow in the driver's seat anymore. Right? And so I had to let go of the identity. And I let go of the identity of probably, I need to struggle to survive, or I need to do X, Y, Z to, I don't know, maybe it was to like be different to my parents, or maybe it was like, I need to build this business for my kids. Like it was like for someone else. Like I kind of realized, hold on, I don't even know if I want to have kids. Why the fuck am I doing this like for some idea of what I might have maybe in the future, or some like plugging of the hole of my parents? Anyway, so that's one. So there we go. There's an example. But what I would be unwilling to give up now is a good question to reflect on, because I've become competent with the process of going through an ego death. The first ones were harder. And I found this really interesting, like going through addiction recovery programs, going through learning how to be in healthy relationships with courses and whatnot, learning how to manage my emotions, how to be embodied in my emotional experience, right? All of these things through all the study that I've done. What I learned was that letting go of identities is a muscle that can kind of be trained. And found this really interesting phenomena where at the start, it was like I was dying.
Yeah.
Like one of the big ones was, oh my God, you know, I'm pursuing this business because I'm trying to fill a hole from my childhood. That was the big, oh my God, somewhere in my mid-20s, I can't remember when. Another one was, oh my God, my parents are just me plus 20 years. They're doing their best. They're not actually fucking, you know, they're not actually drop kicks. I shouldn't give them such a hard time. I can't blame my hang-ups on them. I can't put my victim story on them, because they're just me plus 20 years. They're just humans doing their best. Oh God, it was a hard pill to swallow, right?
Yeah.
That was fucking like, whoa, and like for weeks I was like, oh my God, what do I do with my life now? I've let go of this fucking story. And then what are the big ones have I had? Another big one was like realizing how codependently I had showed up in relationships, and like shining the light on that part of myself that was codependent in relationships. Like, oh my God, I've been doing this thing for decades. Like, yeah, and I worked it out.
This is the only way I know how.
I worked it out. Yeah, exactly. This is the only way I know how. Like, I worked it out through a friend introducing me to the concept, and like, I booked another session with my therapist that I'd been seeing for like a decade prior, and I was like, bro, where was the fucking heads up?
Oh my God.
Where was the heads up? And it's like, oh, you know, we've been working on your narcissistic tendencies for the last decade. And I'm like, yeah, but like, didn't you see the signs?
Oh God.
Didn't you see the fucking signs? Like, he knew the fucking toxic relationships. Like, Couldn't you have given me a dictionary and told me to look up codependent? Fucking hell, man. Like, I was so angry, right? And then, of course, in my healed codependent state, I now know, that I cannot control another. And he's just doing his best. And my anger is, justified, but it's a reflection of what's inside me. And it's not about him. I'm so fucking #healed. Anyway, so that was a big one. And I remember thinking there, because there'd been a few times, particularly around relationship breakdowns, that I've had a breakthrough. Lots of people have a breakthrough when they go through a big...
Yeah.
And I've had like 3 or 4, I think, major relationships in my life where they've ended. I've gone through the big ego death. Usually, in those relationships, I've let go so much of myself in like a codependent way, and I've felt trapped in the relationship, and my identity has been tied to the relationship, and the lines of where I end and they begin get blurred. Leaving the relationship was like dying, because it was like a part of me was dying, the part of me that identified in that relationship.
You
become one, right?
Yeah.
Which is true for pretty much any relationship, I'd say. A little part of your identity becomes the identity that's in relationship. But I feel much better boundary now. But when I had the big one was where I worked out I was codependent, or exhibiting behaviors of codependence in my relating. And I had this awakening, and I was like, 31, 32 years old, and I was like, holy fucking shit. How many more identities or shadows, big shadows, must I have the light shone on in my life that fucking wreck me, not really wreck me, but kick me so sideways that it's almost like I don't know who I am, right? And I've had to rebuild the pieces of what the fuck? Because to have a light shone on a behavior that has been there throughout my whole life, and then to look at that behavior and not say that was a bad thing, but to look at that behavior and go, oh, holy shit, I've been doing this thing unconsciously for decades. This has contributed to some subpar results in this area of my life.
Subpar, sure.
That's a fucking kick.
Yeah.
And that was and coming to terms with that, and experiencing that. Experiencing what my part was in so much of that. I was literally on the floor of the shower, in the fetal position, having a good old fucking ugly cry, right, for hours. And my ex very kindly came to me and held me through that, which is very nice of her. But I was at that point so not terrified, but I was just like, fuck me. What am I going to discover next year or next decade? Or what about when I'm 50? Am I going to work something out that I've been doing for the last fucking
years.
Yeah, the last 40 years, the last 30 years, and not like that thing about myself, or fucking flip out about it. So anyway, that was a scary thought, because there's been a couple of those really big ones. So one was codependent relating. What else would there be?
Talking about what would you be unwilling.
I'll come back to that.
Okay.
So the fascinating thing that I understood about myself through shining the light on the uncomfortable parts of what's within, and having a bit of a freak out at the time, because I'm pretty predisposed to, I want to be careful with the language here, because I'm not a psychologist and I'm not diagnosed, but I exhibit symptoms of CPTSD, complex PTSD, and symptoms of type 2 personality disorders. And most of those behaviors I've got pretty reasonably harmonized and pretty well integrated, but they exist, right? Which is why I make jokes about being a narcissist, because those behaviors and different criteria exist in certain forms, and they are true on certain days in certain ways. That's a part of me. And one of the cluster B personality disorders is a borderline personality disorder, which is a void of the sense of self. And it's always fascinated me since I stumbled across it, because
Is that what borderline is?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like borderline is like a borderline psychosis because of the fundamental absence of a healthy sense of self.
Right.
And I found that fascinating ever since I came across it, because there were a number of people in my life who really exhibited the behaviors of borderline in quite strong ways. And I could really point the finger at them, and therefore there are those traits that I must also see in myself, right? Because I see them so clearly in others, because of the resonance with what I experience. And what those have been for me in my journey have been things like, I wouldn't say unstable, but like an unclear sense of self, an unclear sense of identity, and a challenge fitting in when I was developing. So I'm talking about teenage years. And everyone goes through their own version of this, finding out how to fit in as a teenager. But someone who's more on the side of borderline personality, as it's defined, there is a very, very strong adaptive behavior, which is the chameleon effect, right? That someone can match others. And I'm not talking about just in social situations. It's more like a general neurodivergent type thing. I'm talking about like deciding, all my friends are paragliders and that seems cool, so I'm going to become a paraglider. Or the high school version of it is like, my friends dress like skate kids, so I'm going to buy a skateboard and, try on that identity as a skate kid, right? But it continues into adulthood. So for me, it's been less extreme in adulthood. As I said, I feel pretty comfortable that it's not something that manic or chronic for me. But there's those little moments every time there's an ego death, those little moments where my sense of self is very much shaken.
Yeah.
Because the question for me in my mind is, if I let go of this identity, then who am I?
Yikes.
And that is millimeters from psychosis. It's fucking millimeters. Millimeters.
Oh my God.
And that's what's terrifying for me. That's what's the most terrifying about letting go of something. It's like, whoa, fuck, I need time to process this.
Yeah.
Because if I don't have,
reorient yourself to who you are.
Fuck yeah, if I'm letting go of this identity, who the fuck am I? And I've created, in my neurodivergent way, checklists and SOPs to look after myself when I'm having a moment of loss of identity, right? Particularly when I go through breakups, because that's typically when the patterns emerge, right? So I've got my my breakup SOP, and it's like, what can I do to feel real?
Oh no.
What can I do to feel real? And I've got certain trigger music, I've got certain trigger actions, I've got certain trigger hobbies that I know that I can always go back to, which trigger me feeling real and me remembering who am I, who is my identity, who is Peter? Yeah. And so to be certain songs. I can pick up a guitar and play a couple of chords that I've been able to play since I was 12 years old. And I'm like, okay, I know that I'm real because I can do these things. It might be something to do with entrepreneurship or business, right? Because that's always been a part of me forever. It might be calling one of my childhood friends who I've known for decades and decades and decades. And they know the real Peter, because when Peter was 5 years old, we were spending time together, right? And I haven't yet got to answer the question, but as I developed these SOPs, as I learned more about the process of identities being able to be shed and feeling that like a muscle and building my competency in being okay in my sense of self, even though I've let go of an identity, which feels like cutting an arm off, right? But that's growth. Letting go of the old, shedding the old skin, moving forward. That's why my spirit animal's a snake, or in part anyway, right? Shed the old skin, move forward. But we have to die. The old skin has to die. You've got to let it go. Imagine a graph where you have an increase for each pattern that you find, for each shadow that you find, for each subconscious behavior you discover about yourself. You've been doing them for more years, so they're bigger. They're bigger oh fuck moments. They're scarier.
Yeah.
When I discovered my relationships were codependent, and most of them had been since I was a kid, I was like, holy shit, I can see threads of this identity and threads of this behavior and threads of this part of me right from when I was a kid. It's like the last 30 years. When I worked out what I was doing in my business, it was only 20 years. This is 30 years. I'm like, shit, in a decade, I might find something I've been doing for 40 years. That's fucking scary, right?
Yeah.
But, so that's increasing. That's increasing on a reasonably linear scale, I guess, based on your age. But, of course, provided the behavior has existed since whenever. But they probably have, because They make up your psyche, and that's all imprinted when you're a kid, right? You find something out about yourself, you've probably been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
But even though the oh fuck moments get bigger and the identities to let go of get bigger, the competency in being able to handle them is increased.
Right, the more you do it.
The more you do it. So when I'm going through an ego death, and sometimes it's like walking down the beach in Burleigh Heads. I remember the last one, I can't remember what it was. And I'm feeling this feeling of like, oh my God, I can feel this shedding. I can feel something shedding. I'm letting go of an identity here. I was like, well, this feels familiar. This feels familiar. And I'm on the phone to a friend and I was like, you know what? And it wasn't a childhood friend or anything. It was just, someone I'd known more recently. I was like, shit, going through a bit of an ego death. Okay, well, time to get out the SOP. I'm going to schedule a couple.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'm going to schedule a couple of days off, a couple of days mental health leave from my team. I'm going to let myself have all the emotional process that I need to have to work through it. And then I know on the other side of the death, let the death happen. Embrace it. Let it come. And then on the other side of it, I'll get back to the real Peter with the things that I know are the real Peter. I'll play the PlayStation game that I love. I'll listen to the music that I love. I'll read the book or the author or watch a video or whatever, call the person, and then the sense of realness can be plugged back in and switched back on.
Oh, see, that's what I've been doing the past months. But it's been months.
Excellent, yeah. Well, the first time, it might take months. It might take months to let go of an identity and actually go through that cycle of, because part of you is dying. And there's mourning included in that. And there's the 5 stages of grief with that. And so you got to go on that ride, right? Like that ride is, and that grief is fucking real. My God. And that was when I was crying on the floor of the shower. That was the processing. It was the grieving, and there was a little bit of a story of like, oh my God, I've wasted these years and blah blah blah. But there was also like this massive release. One of the big let goes was not that I was angry at my mum, but like the realization of what I was holding on to from the past and keeping alive in our relationship. What stuff from the past, what stories from the past, what bullshit from the past was I holding on to about our relationship that was keeping old energy alive in the relationship, that was stopping us from having a healthy relationship with each other. And I realized what was on my side of the street, because she'd cleaned up most of hers. She'd really cleaned up most of hers. But there was still more that I was holding on to. And I dropped that. My identity of, I don't even know what that one was. Probably like, I don't know, maybe that I was an unlovable boy, maybe. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but whatever that identity was there, I dropped it and let go. So all that to prepare to answer the actual question. What identity would I be unwilling to let go? Because after going through a few of those ego deaths, I've questioned, like, well, what would I be unwilling? If I'm willing to let go of pretty much any identity, what identity am I unwilling to let go of?
The first question was, what identity would you be willing to?
I thought it was, what would I be unwilling to let go of?
No. The original question was, what would you be willing?
Oh,
and
shit!
So you've told me the story of all the identities.
I'm willing to let go of just about anything. There's one I don't think I would let go of.
Right. Why is it?
Being an entrepreneur. I don't think I can let go of that identity.
It's a good identity to have. Does it hurt anybody?
It's pretty much in the fact. Well, I guess it comes down to like, what is the meaning of entrepreneur? What's the definition of what is the meaning of entrepreneur?
What if you're 50?
Yeah, and I'm just gardening.
Yeah.
Am I still an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Well, my definition of entrepreneur is someone who takes disparate or unknown resources and creates a value exchange through synthesizing those resources. And that resource might be knowledge, it might be assets, it might be money, it might be influence, it might be attention, it could be pretty much anything could be counted as a resource. And there's some kind of magic synthesis through vision that a product or a service or something is born, and there is then able to be value. There's value created and then most likely exchanged. That's my definition of entrepreneurship. If I was just fucking gardening in retirement and I'm going down the shop to buy garden supplies all the time, fertilizer, and I realize that the fertilizer is really expensive there and I can import some fertilizer from China, but in order to fill one shipment, I need to sell some on eBay, and I find that, hey, this stuff's really expensive on eBay and I can sell it at X amount, I'd probably do that. Or maybe if I've got zero interest in making money, maybe I make a fertilizer not-for-profit and sell fertilizer at cost price. Or maybe I make it a social enterprise and funnel it into someone who wants to start a garden but doesn't have the money to. Or maybe I start a local co-op and bring together resources so that all the gardeners in my community can get cheaper gardening.
Yeah, that's really good.
I think my engineering brain that looks at systems, whether they be commercial, government, human relationships, whatever systems they are, I think my engineering brain will always strive for improvement and an optimization of a system. And I think that's fundamentally what entrepreneurship is. There is a benefit to the entrepreneur.
Sure.
In most cases, a commercial benefit to the entrepreneur. That's part of the value that's created in a system. But that action of taking disparate resources, creating value, I think that's pretty much wired into me. So entrepreneurship is an identity I don't think I could give up. I could fucking leave everything else.
Okay.
I reckon I could leave everything else. Yeah, because I'm a paraglider. Fucking cool. I might stop paragliding tomorrow. Great. I'm no longer a paraglider. Great. I'm a ladies' man. I could give that up if my priorities changed. Maybe. I think anything that someone is unwilling to give up potentially has shadow in there somewhere. Okay, I don't know if it's shadow or if it's blind spots of some sort. If I said my identity is, I'm trying to question my own thoughts. What if I said my identity is that I have a growth mindset and I will not give up that identity?
It's pretty contradictory.
Yeah, what does that even mean? Yeah.
Yeah, but what if, for example, the movie that we watched last night, this dude realizes that he's codependent.
Yeah.
And then he loves it. He loves that he's codependent. He's unwilling to give that identity up.
Yeah.
Because he loves it. Do you think there's the shadow there? Or just full acceptance of the self? Some people may not necessarily question their identity all the time. And that they don't feel the need to, kill parts of themselves.
Yeah. I can't. So, was the original question what would I be willing to give up, or what would I not be willing to give up?
What would you be willing to give up?
What would I be willing to give up?
Yeah. So my
and
follow-up question
is it been, what would I be willing to give up for success? What would I be willing to give up to reach a goal?
Just out of your current identities.
My current realities.
Yeah. What would you be willing to give up? And why that?
I don't know. I've got a pretty loose sense of self to begin with, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel pretty comfortably fluid in my identity. So there isn't really much that I would be unwilling. There's not much that I would be unwilling to give up. It's hard enough for me to agree on what identities I have and hold on to, because not constantly, but from time to time I'm questioning the realities, and so give up or not give up, like, I don't even know if they're solid sometimes. Like, it's enough of, it's not a chore, but like, it's enough of a, it takes me enough energy just to healthily and in an integrated way hold on to the identities that I have right now. I just let the universe give and take what it wants to.
That's good.
For the,
That's
after
cool.
that, yeah.